Well, today marks 5 years since the declaration of the COVID-19 pandemic. It impacted just about every aspect of our lives, including the way that we practiced our faith. Online masses, social distancing in the pews, and no distribution of the blood of Christ. These were just a few of the changes that quickly became the norm. But perhaps the heaviest and the most meaningful impact was felt by those who were dying and their family members. At a time when hospitals were closed to guests, priests were allowed to enter to anoint the dying, giving them not just human contact, but divine as well. And we turn now to Father Ryan Connors, a priest in the Diocese of Providence, who at the time of the pandemic was in the Archdiocese of Boston, and he ministered to people who had COVID-19. Father Ryan, thank you for joining us. Hard to believe it's been 5 years since the pandemic was declared back in 2020. Take us back to that time and give us an idea of what it was like for you.
Tracy, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you. Yes, 5 years ago, it was such an awful time, and such a time we didn't really know what was happening right at the very beginning of the pandemic. I was a professor and a member of the formation faculty at St. John's Seminary in Boston. And 5 years ago at this time, we sent all of the students, all the seminarians home to parishes. And I went to live in a parish myself, and we continued academic instruction by Zoom and kind of waited to see what would happen next.
And Father, I know that you were part of Cardinal O'Malley's task force at the time of 21 priests that were trained safely to anoint COVID-19 patients. What was your reaction to being selected, and what did your training entail?
Yeah, so this was at the very beginning of the pandemic when hospitals and nursing homes were just creating protocols and were super strict at the very beginning, not letting any visitors or even priests in. And so there were many people, many Catholics, who were without the sacraments in hospitals and nursing homes. And so Cardinal O'Malley, to his great credit, really, recognized that we had to do everything we could to prevent this. And so he worked with the civil authorities and the hospital authorities to make possible that if there were priests who were quarantined and wouldn't infect anyone else, that they would be available to go and anoint people in these situations. And so for a period of time, I lived with two other priests from the Archdiocese of Boston, and we were available for that ministry. It was really a privileged time in my life, in my priesthood, actually.
Yeah, and another change, too, is in some places, many places, actually, including here in the nation's capital, masses were canceled during the pandemic. Let's talk about that and what happened in Boston and what role the Catholic Church played during the pandemic when it comes to outreach and keeping people alive.
Yeah, it was such a difficult time, and people didn't know what to do, especially right at the beginning. So I don't quibble with civil or ecclesial leaders trying to do their best to figure out how to navigate that very difficult situation. But as I say, to the Cardinal's great credit, to make available priests who would ensure that no one would die without the sacraments. He made these priests available, and so it was a manifestation of the Church's closeness to people to ensure that even in this difficult time of the pandemic, the preaching of the gospel and the administration of the sacraments, insofar as possible, was able to continue. So it was, in a certain way, a blessed and a grace-filled time.
Yeah, Father, how do you think the pandemic affected the faithful as a whole, and what do you think we learned?
Yeah, well, obviously, it's a time we never want to return to, and especially in those early days when people didn't know how to navigate the situation. It was, I often say, was my first pandemic. We were just trying to figure out what to do. But of course, it wasn't the Church's first pandemic. In the history of the Church, she's had to navigate through these situations before and make the sacraments available to people, sometimes in creative ways, and make clear that even in those situations, the preaching of the gospel and the celebration of the sacraments has to continue as best as we are able.
Well, Father, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing this with us. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.